chilling hush fell over the courtroom, thick and heavy as if the very air held its breath. Richard Rawlings, the loud and proud face of Gas Monkey Garage, stood waiting. In a single shattering moment, his world would crumble to dust. 15 long years in federal prison. No chance of freedom for a decade. The sentence hit him like a wrecking ball, and the king of cars, once so full of bravado, simply collapsed. This was just the beginning of a nightmare that would shake the car world to its core. Richard Rawlings sentenced. For many years, Richard Rawlings seemed like he could not be stopped. He was more than just a guy who loved cars. He was the car guy, the loudest voice in the room, the biggest personality on TV. He made quick car deals, big burnouts, and million-dollar sales look easy, as if it was all just a game. With his backward cap, cool rock star attitude, and a beer always in hand, he built Gas Monkey Garage from a small shop in Dallas, Texas, into a brand known all over the world. His TV show, FastNLoud, turned him into a household name. And to his fans, he was the real deal. Honest, raw, and truly Texan. Richard Rawlings built a legend around himself. He claimed to find rare cars that no one else could, pulling million-dollar classic cars from old barns and forgotten garages as if they were just waiting for him to discover them. His word became like law in the world of car collecting. If Rawlings said a car was rare, then it was rare. If he said it was real, buyers believed him without asking any questions. This strong belief in him, built by his famous TV show and his larger-than-life personality, made people less likely to question his deals, even when some expert collectors had doubts. His fame was not just a happy accident of his business. It was a powerful tool that allowed his questionable activities to grow without being caught right away because people trusted the image he showed them more than they looked for real proof. But as time went on, the deal started to look too perfect, too clean, too consistent. Car collectors, especially the older, more experienced ones, began to whisper behind closed doors. They wondered how Rawlings could find so many one-of-a-kind cars. They questioned how his vehicles kept selling for record-breaking prices again and again. Some people thought he simply had the best eye for finding cars in the business. Others were not so sure. There were quiet talks, rumors of cars being made to look better than they were, of papers not quite matching the cars. A few stories came out about buyers who could not check the true history of what they had bought. But with a national TV show, a fan base that was growing very fast, and lots of money coming in from endorsements, those quiet whispers were easily lost in the loud roar of the Gas Monkey brand. Richard Rawlings was everywhere. He was not just fixing up cars. He was bringing legends back to life. And he sold that dream better than anyone else. But dreams, when they are built on shaky ground, do not last forever. And in late 2023, that ground would crack open right beneath him. Cracks in the Gas Monkey myth that the downfall of Richard Rawlings did not begin with police lights or a sudden raid. It started quietly with paperwork. In late 2023, the IRS began what was supposed to be a routine check of Gas Monkey Garage. They were just looking for a few small inconsistencies in the quarterly money reports. This kind of thing happens all the time in businesses. So, there were no alarms, no big news headlines. Just an accountant asking questions, expecting to wrap things up in a few weeks. But those simple questions quickly led to big problems. The IRS auditors found business expenses that did not match what the company was actually doing in public. Meals were listed as if they were car parts. Fancy plane rides were disguised as transport runs for vehicles. Personal cars owned by Rawlings were labeled as inventory for sale, but they were never actually sold. And then, even more troubling, secret money deals overseas were found that had never been reported to the government. At first, it was not obvious that anything was wrong. Rawlings's books looked very neat, almost suspiciously so. But special accountants, who are trained to look for fraud, began to pull at small threads of information. The deeper they looked, the less it seemed like simple, careless mistakes in bookkeeping, and more like a carefully built trick, a front designed to hide something. Then came the most important discovery, a VIN, which is a special identification number on a car. One particular vehicle, a supposed rare restored car that had been sold for over $400,000, caught the attention of the auditors. This VIN did not match any known production batch for that type of car. In fact, it did not match any manufacturer record at all. It was a ghost number, a VIN that should not exist. This kind of fake VIN is a known method used in classic car fraud. Investigators followed the trail of this ghost VIN. They traced the sale through a complex web of fake companies, hidden money transfers, and forged paperwork. What had started as a basic small mistake in a tax filing had now revealed something far, far bigger. They were no longer just dealing with financial misstatements. They were looking at clear deception, fraud, and possibly even criminal activity. The IRS quickly referred the serious case to the Department of Justice. That single VIN error was not just a one-time mistake. It was a door. And when investigators opened it, they found an entire hidden network of lies and illegal activities behind it. Inside the secret cage. When federal investigators finally raided Gas Monkey Garage, they did not just find the usual tools and old muscle cars you would expect in a car shop. They found a system, a machine carefully built to trick people. Hidden behind locked doors far away from the bright cameras and the TV production crews, was a section of the shop that did not even appear on any building plans. This secret room had no signs and no cameras, and it was always kept locked. Inside this room, which former employees called the cage, was a setup with laser tools, high-end printers, and VIN stamping kits. According to official government papers, this hidden area was the very heart of Richard Rawlings's illegal operation. One former employee even described it as looking more like a forgery lab than a car shop. For almost 8 years, Rawlings and a small, trusted group of staff had secretly changed the identities of dozens of vehicles. Regular everyday classic cars were transformed into high-value rarities. To make these lies believable, fake papers were created. Dealer invoices, build sheets, even old historical ownership records. These fabricated documents, including ownership papers and vintage receipts, were made to look so real that even experienced car collectors could not tell they were fake. These cars, with their new fake identities and forged paperwork, were then sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, often to buyers in other countries. This made the crimes cross borders and become federal offenses. And the most shocking part was that many of these fake cars were featured right on television on episodes of FastNLoud. During the trial, parts of FastNLoud episodes were played in the courtroom as proof for the government lawyers. In these clips, Rawlings could be seen showing off what he called unicorn finds and rare gems with almost no paper history, but amazing visual appeal. The lawyers argued that the show was not just for entertainment. It was a way to market the fake cars, a clever cover for the fraud. Jurors watched clips of Rawlings telling impossible stories about the cars, like how they were owned by famous people or kept in garages for decades, found against all odds. These cars always appeared at the perfect time and were always for sale soon after filming. Then expert witnesses came forward. Car historians, specialists in VIN numbers, and former factory employees explained how unlikely these finds were. They showed how statistically impossible it would be for one man to stumble upon so many one-of-a-kind cars. They were not just unlikely, they were impossible. With every new person who spoke, the image of Richard Rawlings as a brilliant car flipper began to fall apart. It became clear that he had not just built a garage. He had built a massive lie. What truly sealed the case against Richard Rawlings was not just the fake papers or the changed VINs. It was the powerful stories from inside his own empire. 3 former Gas Monkey Garage employees came forward and each told almost the exact same story, which was very damaging. They described a section of the building deep inside the shop, past the brightly lit filming bays and the public work areas that was not on any floor plan. It had no signs, no cameras, and was always locked. They called it the cage. Inside that room, the real work happened. It was not about fixing old cars, but about giving them new identities, reinventing them. There were industrial VIN stamps, precision welding tools, and a workstation completely dedicated to making fake documents. Ownership papers, vintage build sheets, and dealer receipts that looked so real even experienced collectors could not tell the difference. One former employee stated it looked more like a forgery lab than a car shop. This was not something Rawlings just stumbled into. It was carefully planned and orchestrated. The government lawyers showed that this secret area had been used for at least 6 years based on internal emails, bills for special equipment, and surveillance camera footage from nearby businesses that showed parts being brought in secretly through side doors. Rawlings was the only person with the master key to this hidden room. While FastNLoud filmed in one half of the garage, the real illegal business took place in the shadows. What shocked investigators was not just the operation itself, but how huge it was. Not only were VINs being swapped, but complete new identities were being built from scratch. Cars were not just being restored, they were being reborn as rarities. When one employee tried to raise concerns about what was happening, Rawlings supposedly told him, "If you cannot handle this part of the business, you are in the wrong game." That employee quit shortly after, but his story was not heard until the Department of Justice stepped in, and it matched perfectly with the paper trail the lawyers were building against Rawlings. The existence of this secret forgery lab with its specialized equipment and Rawlings's exclusive access clearly showed that the fraud was not just a one-time mistake, but a deeply planned and controlled criminal operation at the very core of Gas Monkey Garage. The Shelby GT500 betrayal. The final crushing blow that sealed the case against Richard Rawlings was not just about fake papers or changed VINs. It was about the stories told by people who worked inside his own company. 3 former Gas Monkey garage workers came forward, each sharing almost the exact same account. And what they revealed was very damaging. The turning point came with a single very important sale. A 1967 Shelby GT 500. Rawlings called it his crown jewel, the holy grail of muscle cars. He sold this car to a collector in Europe for a staggering $1.2 million. This sale had been heavily promoted online, talked about in many interviews, and celebrated on episodes of FastNLoud. Rawlings had hyped it up as the ultimate find, but there was a huge problem. It was not a GT 500. It was not even close. The deception came to light when the European buyer tried to get insurance for the car through a company in Europe. Questions immediately started to pop up. The VIN, the car's unique identification number, failed to pass the authenticity check. The build sheet, a document showing how the car was originally made, looked suspicious. Experts then traced the car's frame and discovered that the vehicle was in fact a standard 1967 Mustang. It had been restored, yes, but it was worth less than $200,000, a tiny fraction of what the collector paid. The collector, stunned and feeling completely betrayed, began recording video messages. He could not fly in for the trial because he was ill, but his sworn statement was played in full for the jury. In his message, he spoke about how much he admired Rawlings, how he had followed Gas Monkey for years, and how he trusted that the man who built an empire on passion would never trick someone like him. I believed in Richard, he said, holding up the original purchase agreement. Now I see he was acting the whole time. That emotional testimony hit the jury hard. But the government lawyers did not stop there. They played recordings of voicemails Rawlings had left for the buyer, promising the car's authenticity. He used phrases like 100% verified from my private network, and I would never stake my name on a fake. But that is exactly what he had done. The sale of the Shelby solidified the wire fraud charges. It crossed international borders, involved falsified documents, and clearly showed that Rawlings intended to trick the buyer. This incident was the moment that completely broke the illusion, not just for the court, but for Rawlings's entire global fan base. The trick was not just a technical one. It was deeply personal. This high-value fraud involving a car he promoted as the Holy Grail showed how far Rawlings was willing to go to exploit the trust he had built with his public image, leading to very serious federal charges. The betrayal felt by the collector highlighted how Rawlings's celebrity and perceived passion directly enabled this massive deception, making the fraud feel like a personal attack on his fans. What made Richard Rawlings's crime so powerful and effective was not just how good the fake papers were or how rare the cars seemed to be. It was the TV show FastNLoud. The show gave him a global stage. Every car flip, every new find, every dollar earned was broadcast with loud, exciting music, fast edits, and his charming personality. The show was not just for fun. It was, in fact, a key part of the evidence against him. Rawlings did not need to convince buyers one by one. He convinced millions of viewers every single week. The lawyers for the government knew this, and they used it powerfully during the trial. Full clips from FastNLoud were played for the jury. In these clips, Rawlings could be seen bragging about finding rare cars, calling deals miracles, and flaunting paperwork as if it were absolute truth. When these clips were compared side by side with what expert witnesses said about fake VINs and false documents, the message became crystal clear. The show itself was a major part of the scam. For example, in one episode, Rawlings held up a build sheet, claiming it came directly from the car's original owner. In court, that very same sheet was proven to be a forgery. It had been created using a template found in the secret backroom printer that was seized during the raid on Gas Monkey Garage. His celebrity, which he had carefully built through the show, was not just a side effect of the fraud. It was a weapon that made the entire scheme work. Buyers trusted him because they saw him on TV. They saw the cars before and after their transformations. They saw his passion, his energy, and the seemingly amazing deals he made. But what they did not see was the careful manipulation happening behind the scenes, the staged finds, the scripted discoveries, and the vehicles arranged purely for TV drama. The courtroom quickly realized that Rawlings did not just build fake cars. He built a fake reality. And when you have control over the story, you can sell anything, even a lie. This showed how his fame was used to deceive people, turning his public image into a tool for his criminal activities. The show effectively manufactured authenticity, making viewers believe in a fabricated world where his deals were always genuine. Within hours of the guilty decision being read, big car auction houses like Barrett-Jackson and Micom quickly put out urgent statements. They announced that they would begin internal investigations into any vehicles that had been previously sold through Gas Monkey Garage. They were not taking any chances, and cars that were once seen as rare treasures, crown jewels of collections, were now under deep suspicion. Private collectors who used to proudly brag about owning a Gas Monkey original suddenly went silent. Some immediately demanded their money back. Others quietly pulled their expensive cars from upcoming auctions, not wanting them to be scrutinized. A few even contacted law enforcement directly, suspecting that they too had been tricked. Insurance companies also quickly got involved. High-value policyholders who owned many expensive cars were flagged. Claims were frozen and cars were called back to be checked again for their true value. One executive at a major insurance company called the scandal the largest classic car authenticity collapse in the last 25 years. This showed that the fraud was not just about a few cars. It infected the perceived value and trustworthiness of a whole part of the car market. Then came Discovery, the TV network that aired FastNLoud. They were reportedly blindsided by the federal charges and wasted no time in reacting. Within just 72 hours of Rawlings being found guilty, Discovery Channel officially cut all ties with him. All FastNLoud episodes were quickly removed from streaming platforms. Spin-off shows were cancelled and contract talks with other Gas Monkey personalities were stopped indefinitely. Rawlings's merchandise line, which was once a business worth millions of dollars, was pulled from store shelves. Online marketplaces began banning official Gas Monkey items worried about potential lawsuits from angry buyers. Sponsors ran away. Advertisers vanished. And people who once worked with Rawlings and proudly showed off their ties to him now put out cold practice statements saying they were unaware of any illegal activity. In a matter of just a few days, the empire Richard Rawlings spent decades building was reduced to dust. He was not just cancelled, he was erased. The rapid and complete collapse of his empire showed how deeply connected celebrity, trust, and market value are in the world of classic cars. It proved that when a famous person's honesty is shattered, the whole system they are part of can fall apart, showing that fame can lift you up, but it can also bury you. The final reckoning. The trial against Richard Rawlings lasted 3 weeks. The lawyers for the government laid out a mountain of proof, changed VINs, fake papers, expert testimonies, and a clear paper trail that led directly to Rawlings's own signature. The defense tried to paint him as a passionate but careless businessman, someone who was too trusting and not a criminal. But that argument did not stick. After only 6 hours of thinking, the jury came back with their decision. They found him guilty on all 18 counts. Wire fraud, mail fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. When the verdict was read aloud, Rawlings did not move. He sat frozen like a statue. But as Judge Alan E. Simmons began to speak, everything changed. 15 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole for the first 10. And then the silence in the courtroom broke. Rawlings fell face first into the table, his body limp. Gasps echoed through the room. His ex-wife screamed. Dennis Collins, visibly shaken, tried to reach him, but was blocked by U.S. Marshals. Medics stormed in, giving him oxygen and checking his vital signs. It took 7 long minutes before Rawlings finally moved, barely. Pale, drenched in sweat, and unable to walk. He was wheeled out of the courtroom, strapped to a stretcher. There was no mug shot, no defiance, only an oxygen mask on his face, and the unmistakable look of a man who had lost everything. The courtroom that once saw him as a rock star now saw him for what he truly was, a fallen giant. Richard Rawlings once lived like a rock star. He fixed cars, built an empire, and turned grease-stained metal into gold. He had fans, he had fame, he had fire. And for years, he believed that the public image he built was unbreakable. But behind the beer-chugging bravado and the flashy TV editing was something else. Something colder, more calculated. He did not just bend the rules, he rewrote them. He was not a rebel. He was a manipulator.